Hey folks, so the following title was on my wishlist for a while, in part because its ambience seemed akin to Darkest Dungeon, but in space. And then I lucked out and got a review key for it. So here we are, checking out Snowhound Games' Grim Galactic card game, Deep Sky Derelicts. Yeah, I didn't expect the deck building thing, but was this an example of developers playing their cards right, or did this reviewer wind up derelicting on their duty? I'm your host Arlyeon, and let's find out together. In the distant future, mankind has extended its reach to the stars above, seeking to master that vast expanse and unearth the secrets it has to offer. That said, the search is not helmed by its favorite children, those who live on the idyllic mirror worlds. Rather, the dangerous task of seeking out and mapping the remnants of older civilizations falls upon the stateless scavengers, those who are born on the stations and whose lives are spent struggling from day to day. You take the role of one such team of explorers, who are offered the promise of a citizenship if only they can deliver the necessary information to their local authority sub-governor guy. Admittedly, the densest narrative blurb comes at the beginning if you choose to listen to it. Whilst there are more debriefings to be had with him, you don't tend to learn much more about the setting, though there are some allusions towards a pressing deadline, given you're not the only scavenger hunting around. Minor spoiler here, not that you actually get a climatic double cross or a rival to run into at things. They just go smoothly, with the largest narrative payoff being some very optional dialogue that helps put a lot of what you encounter into perspective. So really, Deep Sky Derelict's story is more focused on the journey itself. Just like your employer, you're learning about the ship's history, whether it's by encountering the weird AIs that run them, by unearthing ancient data pads of scavengers long past, or through the optional quests found within each ruined hulk. It's because I got invested in them and the world building at large that I was able to get some degree of closure from the way the game comes to a close. And, if you're hoping for some sort of horror beyond the horizon story, you might wind up being a bit disappointed, and that's because despite the unsettling enemies or the occasional touching on themes of existential dread, more often than not, Deep Sky Derelicts winds up being a bit campy, like giving someone an acid-spitting monster replace their former vomit-prone pooch, or helping a derelict-bound daredevil with her act by firing her face first into her own ship, with suitably tragic results. Still, as much as it's fun to faff about story bits, it's about time to crack open the core mechanics. Okay, maybe slightly inaccurate epithet, given I'm using the New Prospects and Station Life DLC, but they had really neat stuff in them. Anyways, so Deep Sky Derelicts is a dungeon crawler, albeit one with a deck-based battle system. The experience more or less sees you venturing into a variety of fucked up frigates, seeking out the star maps which rest their heart in order to unlock the next tier of total trawlers. Well, that, and engaging just heaps of petty burglary and murder as per traditional dungeon delves. Admittedly, it took a bit for me to get started on the whole random ransacking thing, because even starting off involves some big decisions, and not just the would you care to ruin your day with permadeath one. See, you need to build your crew, but you're limited to 3 people. And since there is a slew of classes, each with their own distinct equipment loadouts, passive skills, and active abilities, it took me way longer than it should have to finally settle on a team. Figuring out the passive personality bonuses was a lot easier to figure out once I'd figured out my actual team. Now, I'll admit, I was immensely grateful that the game actually allowed me to preview the class's skill trees, as that started to fundamentally influence the type of team I led. Unfortunately, I wasn't quite as kind with the secondary classes it later introduces, especially since they share skill points with your base, thus obliging you to think long and hard on crafting your character build, at least until you can comfortably afford respecking. So guilty admission here, but I think a good chunk of my later playtime was just spent dinking around the hub, playing around with what implants to give to my scavengers, as well as item crafting, in order to make the most stupid, over-optimized characters I could. Whilst this is tied to Station Life DLC stuff, Jesus, the power. Normally it can sometimes get tricky to make an efficient combat deck since it's built with character abilities and whatever cards are associated with the gear you find. Great items can have terrible cards or vice versa, but crafting let me turn all the lucre I generated into things like Dante, the 100% dodge tracker, who's even more broken than he sounds thanks to his bullshit burst deck. Though, It took me a bit to get there, due to how taxing the survival aspect was on my initial funds. See, you scavenger types are poor, and everything costs money. Like the basic act of healing, because yes, while you have rechargeable shields, your health doesn't replenish naturally. And if you just get tired of your characters because they're dead, hiring someone new costs money. And all of this is further compounded by the energy system. See, energy is essentially just burned by everything you do. Traveling? Check. Fighting? Check. As well as the scanning systems you use to scout ahead. And once you run out of this resource, you'll find yourself without shields, unable to mount a proper counterattack, and losing health every turn. Basically, it's a death sentence. That said, there are ways to mitigate this. You can return to the ship, buy fuel cells, turn your hard-earned loot into fuel. Hell, even certain skill points provide ways to stave off the cold touch of the void. Still, it's hard to match the glory of energy generators since they just permanently power up sections of this ship. I mean, there's a reason I spent a lot of the early game poor, and part of that was me just neglecting those things. That, and I think a big part of it was just my habit of running face first into fights because I'm bloodthirsty as heck, and it took me a bit to realize that environmental hazards are typically not an ideal location to make a stand in. There's some neat ones, like ones that power you up or give you extra turns, but fighting a gang of murderous robots while getting cooked by a sunspot, that's a big no bueno. Still, once I stopped being an idiot, I found myself appreciating the sheer quantity of optional content to tackle. Each of the Derelicts has an assortment of quests you can do for profit and experience. There's settlements and pirate encampments you can trade or ransack. I think that's a New Prospects DLC thing, but for the most part, the moral of that story is my morals are questionable and I probably shouldn't be allowed to do things for profit. Frankly, I found myself often over-leveled because of how meticulously I was picking over each ship for scrap and for fights and the questing opportunities, even despite the fact that I only need to turn in one star map to unlock the next tier of ships to challenge. Given that you're not actually guaranteed to encounter the same Derelicts or quests in a given playthrough or get the same quest results, Daredevil turned paint smear, There's plenty of replayability to boot, which sort of motivated me further to just explore as much as I could in that given playthrough. That, and because, if you're an idiot like me and piss off the Intergalactic Empire, and then accept their offer of an unfair trial, you might wind up with a deleted save file. But you will get an ending! Still, I should acknowledge that while I have gushed a fair bit about this game, or rambled, it's not a flawless experience. There were a few miscellaneous bugs I encountered, with a notable one requiring me to reload the game so I could actually move on the dungeon map. It was weird. That said, the other issue I encountered was a matter of crippling lag. As the levels get larger, the game begins to chug a bit as you move, and most notably, this is when you place down generators and power up more of the ship. This actually reached its crappy zenith when I encountered the quantum fluctuation environment. See, this environment just chugs normally regardless of what you do, as it arbitrarily spawns hazard regions which then arbitrarily teleport everything inside them. But this plays hell on the game's load times whenever it moves around the generator, since it has to recalculate what part of the fucking ship it's powering up, I guess. I hate it so much! Like, the sunspots hurt like the dickens. I'd still rather navigate through those in small quantities, I guess. Anyways, so I guess if you never wanted to deal with that, or with any story, you could just dive into the arena mode. This is more of just a story-like combat-focused dungeon which tasks you to clear a set of challenging fights and reach the end. It's a really short, sweet, but challenging mode that lets you try out different builds for characters. It should also be maybe a little bit telling that the ending is almost identical to the ending of the base game, with all of the major story differences in the middle, mostly just being the questing and just sort of taking in the world. Hence why I'm all like, the journey is the important part. Now, let's talk visuals for a moment. First off, I do enjoy the game a fair bit. Whether it's the environments or the character and enemy graphics, by and large they look pretty darn neat. It's more the combat winds up looking pretty stylized to the comic book-esque animations that accompany the actions you take. That said, I did find the scanner map itself a bit tedious to stare at. It's like the most bland element of the game for me by far, and I really don't want to sit down and consider how much my time was spent just looking at that grid of gray spares. Like, yes, you can actually sit down and check out those individual rooms, and they look fine, but unless the map indicates there's loot or an NPC there, there's no actual point in zooming in, so get used to looking at that gray tile map. On the bright side, though, soundtrack's pretty fun to listen to. There's some good jams there to accompany your omnicidal actions. In any case, though, let's just boil all this down for the conclusion. When I wound up reaching the game's finale, I was feeling a number of things. Satisfaction, certainly. The depth you're afforded for customizing combat decks and characters is surprising, and demonstrating my mastery of all of this by obliterating the last boss in a one-sided showdown felt good. But there was also a sense of relief. The road had been long, and as much as I appreciated the game, I'd been growing tired of navigating the grid map, especially given the late game slowness involved. As much as I was sure that there was still tons of bits of lore to unearth, or new quests to carry out another playthrough, or old quests to carry out in a different way, I simply found myself exhausted by that point. I appreciated the time I spent, don't get me wrong, enough so that I would warrant the game as a firm hit, but I'm not quite ready to return to the depths of deep space anytime soon. Though, this did entirely make up for the deck building disaster that was my time with Against the Moon. Anywho, thanks for tuning in. If you agree, disagree, or just have something to say to me, feel free to comment. And if you have an interest in supporting my efforts to create new indie reviews, interviews, and gaming content, hit the subscribe button and the bell so you know there's a new release. There's also a Discord, links in the description so you're part of our community, the Crit Hit Cauldron. That said, I'll catch you on the next episode of Crit Hit. Take care till then, folks.